Since we first saw this colour scheme in the Horus Heresy, people have been going wild for House Malinax. It's both enchanted and infuriated people in equal measure. In this video we'll look at how to create the colour scheme of House Malinax and the Forge Fane of Xana. To begin the process, I paint everything, or all the portions that will be that ceramic Malinax colour, with Walnut by scale 75. Next up, I highlight all the armor plates with Tamir Flat Earth. Now you can see on the ridge line that there is a slight appreciation going from light to shadow. That's simply built up with a walnut. So the first layer will be understandably darker than the rest, and then you begin the highlight. Now when the paint is still wet, in order to give the beetle shell a textured appearance, like the Forge World art, I've just added some ivory onto my brush. Scratch that correction, I've added birch onto my brush, but essentially we are looking for a lighter bone colour. And when we dapple this, don't use your best brushes for this, use an old crappy brush. Never throw a brush away, always use your crappy brushes for this kind of work. We just want to gently stipple this onto the surface, gradually softening it out after each successive stroke with the brush, in order to give a soft, focused, mottled appearance. As the paint starts to dry, we're able to add a stronger mottled effect that we're then able to just blend into the surface, into the background. Let's take another look at how we can create this effect by mottling it onto the surface of his back carapace. It's best to begin this process not when the paint is completely wet. Instead, we do need it to be slightly dry. So when we do mottle this effect in, essentially we are rubbing the two paints together. We aren't trying to lift off the paint or remove the paint, we are trying to blend it all into one. Work loose. Don't be afraid of bold transitions at this stage. We can always come back with the brush or with subsequent washes in order to blend them together. And you would be surprised when it dries completely. It doesn't have the same kind of strong transition. When the paint starts to dry, it's still manipulating, it's still moving around, and they will blend gradually into one another. So a very sharp, shocking transition will mottle and soften as the paint starts to dry. Now that the paint has dried, I will add an edge highlight to the surface. I don't want to use a zenithal highlight for this or to complicate the mottled pattern too much. Instead, I will focus on deepening the shadows with subsequent washes, but for now I want to define the sculpt and I want to add an edge highlight. From here I could go on to develop some of the mottling effect as well, but keep in mind this is primarily to sharpen up the lines of the sculpt. Let's speed up the video at this point. We've explained the process, we've explained the theory behind it. This is purely as a reference point. So if you want to see each brush stroke, here it is, sped up a little bit. Let's carry on the process of mottling the armor plate. Again, I will speed these clips up. We've been through the theory of it, you've seen it in practice. Now it's just a case of reference here. When it comes to painting House Malinax, for the most part, if we center our paint scheme around desaturated bone colors, you will be safe. Any color combination, any paint set along those lines will do the trick. But the final unifying layer, the thing that brings everything together, Agrax Earthshade. So I'm giving a liberal dollop of this across the entire surface of the House Malinax scheme, because the way the paint is formulated, it will naturally run into the gaps and recesses. While the paint is still wet, I can come in with birch and a very, very light dappled layer to highlight. Again, wet blending at its finest, at its best, using liquid talent and a bit of wet blending together. So this will get rid of some of the harsher transitions built into the initial layers. It allows us to smooth the scheme over and give a much, much more accomplished finish to our final piece. We'll speed up the video so you can see the application of the colour, but again, the process is exactly the same across the entire surface of the miniature, across all the Malinax portions of it at least. Let's work on the metallic banding. So this is Rhinox hide plus copper, so that's a Games Workshop and Vallejo colour. Apologies that these portions are out of focus, but essentially what we are doing is just adding a layer. There's not really that much in the way of tuition at this point, it's more the reference to the colour combination. We add the Rhinox hide to give a much richer balance to the tone. Then I use Caspian Blue by Scale 75, and this is very much a wash layer. So this is around 70 to 80% water, or your thin and medium of choice. And I am pushing this into the gaps and the recesses in order to create a mottled, oxidized look to the copper, to the bronze that rims the House Malinax scheme. After this stage, we can then add sponge chipping to the edges. So in terms of the copper, we use copper to sponge chip the sides. For the metallic itself, we can use a lighter silver color, something something along the lines of steel by Vallejo Model Air, or aluminium. But essentially, that is it. That's the Xana and Malinax paint scheme. I hope you've enjoyed that. We will be returning to this subject on a knight, maybe a knight armature or maybe one of the mini knights from Titanicus. But until next time, catch you then.